Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our hydrothermal late night for the Rutgers Geology Museum. We have some fun activities planned for you tonight. First up, we will be doing hydrothermal vent trivia. Then we'll do a craft, and then we have a special speaker who has researched these amazing environments that will talk to us a little bit more about these unique environments and animals that live there. Okay, so we'll get started with trivia. Ria, do you want to come on and go to the next slide? Let me get the. Okay, so um, if you haven't played with us before, you can either track your points on your own or write them on a piece of paper. You can also scan this QR code or go to menti.com and enter that 7-digit code, and that will allow you to answer the questions along with us live. And you just push select your answer by tapping it on your phone or computer or whatever device you're using. So take a minute to get set. Okay, go ahead, Ria. You can go to the. So Ria is going to read our questions for us.
Okay, so the first question is, deep sea hydrothermal vents are found A, at the crest of mid-ocean ridges on the seafloor, B, underneath islands, C, on top of mountain ranges like the Andes, or D, anywhere earthquakes occur on the ocean floor.
Okay, so either record your answer, or if you're on Menti, you can select it. A couple people have selected. Most people are going with A right now. Have no other answers, so everyone's picking A as their choice, which makes me happy. Means you're paying attention in your science classes. So yes, go ahead.
So yes, A is correct. At the crest of mid-ocean ridges on the seafloor, the hydrothermal vents are the result of seawater percolating down through cracks in the ocean crust, and the water is heated and re-emerges to form vents. So here's the next question. A mid-ocean ridge is formed when two tectonic plates A slide side by side past each other, B move away from each other, C move towards each other, or D are stationary.
All right, we've got a couple people picking either A or B. And again, if you just joined us, you can join the questions, answering them live online by going to menti.com and entering that code that's on the bottom of your screen. And again, keep track of how many questions you get correct, and we'll show you point tally at the end of trivia. All right, so we've got some answers for A, B, and C, but most people are picking B.
So that is the correct answer. B, move away from each other. This is called a divergent plate boundary. Question number 3. When were hydrothermal vents first discovered? A, 1865, B, 1955, C, 1977, or D, 2006?
All right, we've got a few choices. People are going with B and C at the moment. So if you haven't selected your answer yet, yep, still B and C, but most people are picking C.
So that is the correct answer, C, 1977. The first vent was discovered in 1977 by Robert Ballard from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Question 4. Scientists first discovered hydrothermal vents while exploring a mid-ocean ridge near which island or islands? A. Hawaiian Islands. B. Galapagos Islands. C. Vanuatu. Or D. Falkland Islands.
All right, we've got votes for all but Vanuatu at this point. Hawaiian Islands is pulling ahead. What people are selecting. And now we've got A and B tied.
All right, so the correct answer is actually B, the Galapagos Islands. In 1977, scientists in the Alvin submarine discovered the first hydrothermal vents near the Galapagos. Question number 5. The word hydrothermal has to do with what process? A. Eruption of magma that forms volcanic rock. B. Water temperature changes with season. C. Freezing of water. Or D. Heating of water as it moves through hot rocks.
Okay. Sorry, I had to refresh my page. It wasn't showing me what the answer people were picking. So right now we have everyone picking D. We'll give it another second. Oh, and there goes one for B. So we have B and D, but most people are picking D at this moment.
And so D would be the correct answer. Hydro means water and thermal is heat. And just another reminder, if anyone is joining us right now, you can scan that QR code or you can go to menti.com and enter that 7-digit code so that you can play hydrothermal vents trivia with us.
Or just record your answers on your own if you don't want to go to the tech route.
Okay, question 6. The average depth of the ocean is A, 5,500 feet, B, 10,500 feet, C, 12,100 feet, or D, 20,000 feet.
So we've got a split between B, C, and D right now. No one is picking A. Oh, now it is dead even between B, C, and D. This is a hard question.
So
You
the
don't
correct
study the oceans.
So the correct answer is actually C. 12,100 feet is roughly equal to the height of 40 statues of Liberty. That's a lot. Question 7. At what depth are most hydrothermal vents found? A. 15,000 feet, B. 7,000 feet, C. 2,000 feet, or D. 1,000 feet.
This is another split. We've got A, B, and D all selected. Oh, now we have all answers picked. The one pulling ahead at the moment is B, 7,000 feet.
Okay.
We still have selections for all of them.
So the correct answer is B. 7,000 feet is the depth of the bathypelagic zone. Question number 8. Where have active hydrothermal vents been observed on the ocean floor? A. Atlantic Ocean, B. Southern Pacific Ocean, C. Arctic Ocean, or D. All of these locations.
Okay, right now we have people picking A and D. And now we have some votes for B as well. So A, B, and D is what we have people selecting right now. But D is the leader.
Okay, and the correct answer is D, all of these locations. About 240 vents have been discovered to date. Question number 9. How many animal species live around hydrothermal vent? A, 0, it is too hot. B, 2 or 3 heat-resistant species. C, tens of species. Or D, hundreds of species.
Right, we've got every answer selected at the moment. The lead is B and D at the moment.
That's a big difference. Either 2 or 3 or hundreds. Okay, are you ready for the answer?
Sure.
So the correct answer is actually D, hundreds of species. To date, over 590 animal species have been discovered living at hydrothermal vents. Question number 10. What type of organism helps convert the toxic minerals released at hydrothermal vents into usable forms of energy through a process called chemosynthesis? A, bacteria, B, plankton, C, worms, or D, shrimp?
Right now we have A and B being selected. A is slightly in the lead, but B is a close second. Give it another couple seconds to see if anyone else is going to guess. Nope. A is pulling ahead. Go ahead, Ria.
And A is the correct answer, bacteria. So in this picture, you can see these Riftia tube worms that have an organ containing chemosynthetic bacteria instead of a gut.
Which we will learn more about when we get to our crafts. Patty's going to be telling us more about that.
And here's another reminder, if you are just joining us, you can scan the QR code if you want to play, or you can go to menti.com and enter the 7-digit code, or just keep track of your score and you can find out how you did. So question number 11, hydrothermal vents can reach temperatures of over blank degrees Fahrenheit. So for the blank, the options are A, 200, B, 400, C, 500, or D, 750.
So the answers are very split on this one, but we have a tie between C and D at the moment. So yeah, go ahead. I don't think now D is pulling ahead.
Okay. So the correct answer is actually D, 750. Black smokers are the hottest type of hydrothermal vent. Question number 12. What kind of energy powers is released from hydrothermal vents? Is it A, gravitational, B, geothermal, C, mechanical, or D, nuclear?
All right, this one, our participants seem to be pretty unanimous. We've got all the votes for B at the moment. Give it another couple seconds. Okay, yep, everyone's still saying B.
And that is correct. Geothermal energy is the same type of energy that powers the geysers in Yellowstone National Park. Question number 13. Which type of animal do hydrothermal vents not directly support? Is it A, giant tube worms, B, shrimp, C, whales, or D, clams?
All right, so we've got a spread again for this one between B, C, and D. C is pulling ahead by a lot at this point. Most people are picking C, but a few people are saying B and D.
So the correct answer is C, whales. So tube worms, shrimp, clams, fish, and octopi have all been found living on and around hydrothermal vents? Question number 14. Which of these is not the name of a hydrothermal vent? A. Kraken, B. Godzilla, C. Mothra, or D. Sasquatch?
Okay, so we have another spread of answers of B, C, and D. Most people are picking D at this moment, but it's close between. Oh, and now we have one person picking A. So we have all answers selected at this point, but D is pulling ahead.
So the correct answer is actually A. Kraken.
Many
Godzilla,
people got that wrong. Only one person got that right. So kudos to that one person.
Godzilla, Sasquatch, and Mothra are all names of vents. So this is a picture of the Godzilla vent, which has since toppled over. Question 15. Black smoker chimneys found at deep-sea vents are made from A. Minerals formed when hydrothermal fluids mix with seawater, B. Sediments that settle to the ocean floor, C. Coral, or D. Magma?
All right, we've got some people picking A and B at the moment. Only a couple people have voted so far up, and some people picking D. But more people picking, it keeps switching. It's pretty close. But A seems to be slightly ahead at this time.
And that is the correct answer. So as the hot mineral-rich water exits the vent, those minerals are deposited onto the vent, building it taller and taller. And just another friendly reminder, if anyone is just joining us now, you can scan the QR code to play on Menti, or you could just go to the menti.com, enter that 7-digit code, or you can just keep track of your score on pencil with pencil and paper.
If you're keeping track at home, tell us how many points you have so far in the chat or comment section. I'd like to know how everyone does.
Question number 16. Ancient hydrothermal vents are believed to have existed on what other planet? A. Jupiter, B. Mars, C. Saturn, or D. Mercury?
So right now we have some people picking A and B. B seems to be the more popular selection at this point, and okay, now people are voting for C. Yep, and now we have some for D. So we've got all the answers picked, but still B is in the lead.
All right, so the correct answer is actually B, Mars. The light-colored sediment in the seen in this picture where the arrow is pointing is 90% pure silica on the surface of Mars. The only way it could have gotten there would have been from superheated water. Question 17. Why doesn't the hot seawater in hydrothermal vents boil? A. The water is under extremely high pressure. B. The water is under extremely low pressure. C. Because of the water's chemical composition. Or D. Because the water is too close to the underwater volcanoes.
All right, we have people selecting A, B, and C. B and C are pretty close. They're tied now. A is slightly ahead, pulling ahead a little further now. Another couple seconds. Anyone else wants to pick? B and C are still tied, but A is still the most popular selection at this point.
Okay, and the correct answer is actually A. So the water is under extremely high pressure. Even though the water can reach over 700 degrees Fahrenheit, the intense pressure keeps it from boiling. Question 18. Which animal was found living on the sides of vent chimneys and is one of the most heat-resistant animals on the planet? A. Yeti crabs. B. Vent mussels. C. Scaly foot gastropods. Or D. Pompeii worms.
If any of you joined us for our Bizarre Beasts late night we had a few months ago, they actually just featured the Yeti crab on their channel. So if you want to learn more about that guy, check out Bizarre Beasts. Okay, so our answers, we have people selecting all four, with D being in the lead, followed by vent mussels being the second most popular choice. But D is definitely ahead still.
Okay, so the correct answer is D. Pompeii worms. So the Pompeii worm is a deep sea bristleworm only found at hydrothermal vents in the Pacific and can survive temperatures up to 221 degrees Fahrenheit. So really funny
That's
looking
crazy.
worm.
Crazy to think about.
Number 19. Scientists have found fossilized organisms from ancient hydrothermal vents that are about blank years old. And to fill in the blank, your options are A, 80 million, B, 500 million, C, 1 billion, or D, 4 billion.
Let's see what people are selecting. So we have a spread between A, B, and C. And now some answers for D. But right now, B is the most popular, followed by A. Well, B's pulling ahead. B definitely has the most votes.
All right, so the correct answer is actually D, 4 billion. Embedded in crystal, these structures seem to be fossils formed near hydrothermal vent over 4 billion years ago.
That is some of the earliest fossilized life ever found. That's crazy.
Because the Earth is about 4, like 0.6 billion years old, right?
Yep.
So that's pretty old. Okay, and this is question number 20. What temperature do the cooler white smoker hydrothermal vents typically reach? A, 150 degrees Fahrenheit, B, 300 degrees Fahrenheit, C, 500 degrees Fahrenheit, or D, 700 degrees Fahrenheit.
All right, we've got a spread between answers A, B, and C. Most people are picking B at the moment, with A being our second place selection. Oh, and now A and C are tied, but still B is slightly ahead of the other two.
Okay, and the correct answer is actually C, 500 degrees Fahrenheit. While cooler than black smokers, white smokers can still reach an impressive 500 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so that was the end of our trivia. So you guys can check your answers. If you got 0 to 10 correct, you're a budding oceanographer. 11 to 15 correct, you're an ocean enthusiast. And if you got 16 to 20 correct, then you're a deep sea expert. So you can give yourself a pat on the back.
Yes, and if you tell us in the comments or the chat how you did, I'd like to know how many you got correct. Okay, thanks for playing trivia with us. So up next, we're going to be doing crafts. And if you want to see what you need for today, you can scan the QR code. Okay, so the QR code will take you to the Padlet, which is where you can post pictures of your final crafts. There are also links where you can download the template for some other crafts that we have, but we're going to be doing this bench warm craft that Patty's going to lead us through. And you can see the supplies that you need for this are listed. So a drinking straw, clear if you have it. You need something tiny and hard that will fit inside the straw. So glitter or dry rice works well for that. If you have clay or Play-Doh, you also need that. If you have red, use red. If you don't have red, use what colors you have. And then some glue or tape to help put this together. All right, Patty, you want to take over?
Sure. Thank you for the intro for the craft. This is the first time I'm going to be helping with the craft, so I'm very excited to be here with you today. As Lauren was saying, we need straws. Any straw will work. They're better if they're clear. Mine, as you can see, are not clear, but they're translucent, so I can see what's inside if I need to. That works better for the model that we're going to be creating. And then I have these long tubes with glitter that they're very helpful when we have to put the straws in it. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter. Just make sure you're in an area where you can actually have a little bit of a mess because it's going to go everywhere. And then you need some kind of magic model or Play-Doh. I'm using magic model today. Mine is red. And we're going to be making a model of a giant tube worm. Now you're experts. You know, they were discovered in 1977. You know a little bit about the environment that they live in. And I'm going to ask Ria if she can share the slide that was after the craft activity with you guys. Because I wanted to explain to you what is it that we're making, right? We're making the model of an animal, but the giant tube worm is actually very cool because they live in the deep sea. They live in what we call an extreme environment. And what makes their environment extreme is temperature, as you were able to see during the trivia, but also the lack of light, right? If we think about plants, they do photosynthesis. If we think about us as humans, we like the sunlight, right? We need like the day and night cycles in order to be able to survive. But these giant tube worms, actually, they don't see the light ever. They cannot be in our environment. They live in a completely different environment. And their body structure is super cool. And you have different parts that you probably have not heard of before. So as you can see in here, I hope you can see my arrow. The first at the top is the plume. And this part here is red, right? It's red like our blood, but it's different, right? It helps them to feel the environment and the water. And there's a lot of reactions that happen in the air that are important. Then we have a second part called the vestimentum right here. That's like the neck. It's gonna look like a tie when we put it up. And then why we're using a straw today is because actually the body in here is hollow inside, right? So, and in there, they have what they call trophosomes. And inside this trophosome is where we can find some bacteria living in there. So the glitter is going to represent the bacteria that live inside the trophosome. And the straw is going to represent the trophosome of the tube worm. And the base is going to be, it's called the trunk. And depending on where are you doing this at home, if you have a foam board or if you have an apple or any fruit that you can like stick it into, we can actually make like a garden of tube worms. If you don't have any of that, don't worry. You can just treat it like an arrangement of flowers and you put them all together and we will just have fun. So I'm gonna ask Ria to stop sharing her slide, and we're gonna go so you can see what I am trying to do here. So the first thing is, as you can see, I put my Play-Doh into a like little square or ball, so it's easy for me to just take my straw and stick it into it. So I'm gonna go on my table here, and I'm gonna go and make sure that I have some of the Play-Doh or magic model covering that. And as if you remember, I have my glitter, and what I'm gonna do is gonna open it up, and because this is very long, I'm just gonna go as far as I can go into the tube with the other end with the straw. And then I have inside of the straw, I have glitter now, which represent my bacteria. These kind of bacteria are known as chemosynthetic bacteria because they have the ability to use inorganic molecules in the water to turn them into the energy, the kind of energy that the giant tube worm can use to survive, right? Just like plants do photosynthesis to get sugar, to produce sugars, right? These bacteria will help the giant tube worm to produce what they need in order to survive. Then once I have this part, you gotta be careful here because this is when it gets messy. If you by accident drop it, glitter everywhere, like it is around me, then you're going to get a little bit of your Play-Doh and you're gonna make like an eye shape. If you see, it's like wider in the middle and then it's like thinner on the side. So it's like an eye. And once you can do this with your hand, and if you want to be more formal, you can use a roller, but I mean, it could be an eye or a leaf, that kind of shape. And I have, if you can see, I have glitter around the external of my straw. So I like to put it in here because there are also some bacteria on the outside of this structure, the plume as well. And to put it up, you're just gonna put the straw on top and close it until it looks like that. Once you have this, we need to do the vestimentum, which is that structure that you saw in the picture. And for that, I am just going to use some of the Play-Doh again, and I'm going to do like a long stripe. You can just put it out with your hands, flatten it, and go around it. In here, and this time you want to push a little bit to make sure that it's not going to fall through, right? Like now I have my trunk covered with some Play-Doh inside, some bacteria that can move and live around inside the straw. And then I have the vestimentum and I have the plume. This is my actual giant tube worm model. And as you can see, I have bacteria inside, but also on the outside. And the difference in that is that the ones that live inside are referred to as chemosynthetic bacteria, and endom is inside. So you have some on the outside, some on the inside. And then I think I've been doing this the whole day. So I wanted to show you my little garden. And I can actually put them here. So if you see, I have different sizes, different colors. And in the one that I just made with you, actually, this straw can bend. So you can put them in different shapes into your model to make sure that they look nice, and you could put it in your desk or in your home and try to remember these things. The structures of the giant tube. I could quickly put another one in, but this time I want to do it short. So I'm going to cut the straw. I'm going to go on a different color glitter. And I also need my little square to push through. So once I have that covered, I'm going to go this time on the orange glitter. Get my bacteria inside, represented by the glitter. I have my little ball that I'm going to shape in the form of a leaf or an eye. Try to get some of those bacteria on the outside. Close it up at the top. And now I'm only missing my vestimentum, which is my little long stripe. Put it around like a necktie. And this is my second. As you can see, super easy to do, very entertaining. I'm using red Play-Doh or Magic Model because it's the actual color of the giant tube worm, but you can use any color you want and make your garden very colorful if you want. So I hope you had fun doing this with me today. And I can't wait to go into the Padlet to see your creations for the night. And today's a special night because we actually have two activities, two crafts. So I think Lauren is going to be showing you how to make an anglerfish, which is another animal that actually lives in the deep sea. And I love what I am seeing right now. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, so you can see the Padlet. So if you joined us with making the craft and you want to post pictures of your vent worms that you made, you can scan this QR code right here. Will take you to this page. And then once you're on here, you just click this little plus sign in the bottom corner and it'll prompt you to add your picture to it. You can also get the template and some coloring sheets from Deep Sea Coloring Sheets here. So I'll click on this for a second so you can see. This is not ours. This is from these institutes you can see here, but there's a whole bunch of pictures here that you can color of different vessels and machinery that is used to study the deep sea. Okay, and then there's also some pictures of some animals that live in the deep sea, so you can go to that. There is also, we had other coloring, but this picture here, this is the document that you can print out. These are the pieces that you will need to make your plate anglerfish. If you don't have a printer, you can just draw these shapes on a piece of paper. And show you. Sorry, I forgot to bring it over with me. So let me stop sharing my screen. Okay, so you will have this sheet. You can see my children already started coloring this piece of paper in. Excuse me, the only piece that this is missing, which when we do this in person, we usually give a little glow-in-the-dark sticker to put on the end of this. So you can draw like an additional little circle and color it to make the light that they have on the end of their, see here, the end of this, I don't know what this is called. It's the fishing rod thing that they lure their prey with. So color these pieces in. You need to cut them out. If you have it at home, you can use a paper plate, okay? Or if you don't have a paper plate, just cut a big circle on a piece of paper. So you can color in your paper plate as well. And this is the one my son made earlier today, my 5-year-old, where we cut out his pieces and glued them onto the plate to make his anglerfish. Okay. He did not want to color the plate in, but if you look at the Padlet right here, we have this nice one that shows some ones with, you know, lots of pretty designs on it. So, and again, you can see the little light at the end of these ones here. So make sure you add that, or if you have stickers at home, you know, you can use a little sticker for that light at the end of their fishing hook. Okay. And I think we have some other coloring sheets. So if you go to our website, to the Geology Museum website, there is a link that has more coloring sheets on the website. They are not posted here. Julie, would you be able to share that with me in the chat? That link?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Sure. Show you where you can get the.
And please let us know in the chat if you like the activities that we had for you tonight. We are constantly trying to come up with crafts that are doable at home. So we hope you had all the materials. And again, you can get creative. Don't forget to share your creations with us. We really want to see them.
Okay, hold on, Julie just gave me the link. Okay, share the website. So again, if you go to our website, geologymuseum.rutgers.edu, go to museum events to late nights, okay? And under here has our hydrothermal. And then here, there's some more coloring sheets that are the ones that I showed you. So there's this one here that you can do, an oarfish. And then there's this one as well with a bunch of different deep sea fish. So if you have a printer at home, feel free to print those out. And again, once you make your crafts, please share pictures of them on the Padlet. We would love to see what you've created. Okay, I think we're ready to move on. Patty, would you like to introduce our speaker? And
yes, of course. I would love, it's my honor tonight to introduce Dr. Ramaydalis Keddis. She has a bachelor's degree from the University of Puerto Rico and also a PhD in environmental microbiology from Rutgers University. And currently she's a teaching instructor of microbiology in the School of Environmental and Biological Sciences. And for the longest time, support of the museum. So we're really happy to have you here tonight. Thank you for your time. And with further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Keddis and her research on hydrothermal vents. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty, for that great introduction. So as Patty said, I'm going to talk about deep sea hydrothermal vents in general a little bit. And I'm glad, I mean, some of those trivia questions, I was surprised they were really hard for people that don't know. But it's really interesting. Just a little bit about me. I am from Puerto Rico, and extreme environments have always been interesting to me. And when I started working on extreme environments from when I was an undergrad, when I saw deep sea hydrothermal vents, I fell in love with them since the first time I was exposed to it. And it's a really cool thing. And I will talk to you a little bit about how not only it kind of helps us understand time on Earth, right? Like some trivia questions, geological time frames, how life started, the different types of life that can happen in the absence of the sun, for example, but also how this can translate to life in other planets, right? Not only in Mars, like you saw, but also in, there's research trying to understand how life can be possible in planets such as some of Jupiter's moons, for example. Right, so without further ado, let's start. So let's talk first oceanic zones, right? So we are up here, right, in the continental shelf. This is what we see when we look at the beach, right? And as we see, or what we can't see from sea level, from us standing outside the beach, is that the deep water column is actually very, very deep in some places. As again, one of our trivia questions, it was usually 7,000 meters. The deepest trench on Earth is down to 12,000 meters. Which is the Marianas Trench. And it's pretty stable, as you can see here, temperature-wise. The deep ocean, deep sea, is very cold. It's around 4 degrees Celsius, which is around the temperature of your fridge, right? So if we go down there, well, we cannot go down there ourselves, right? We need some machinery to help us with that. It's very, very cold, and as it was mentioned in the trivia before, you are under extreme pressure. And when you think about the deep ocean, you think about things like this, like part of your craft today, right? Organisms or fish or anemones that in the absence of light, because the sun is not, sunlight is not available down there. So you have the fish there have to do alternative ways of kind of signal or basically turn on their lights just to attract prey most of the time. So this is our anglerfish, right? It's not as pretty as you see there, but this is how it looks at dark field photography. These are some of the other organisms that live there, which are scary looking, but are extremely, extremely interesting. Now, everybody thinks that the deep ocean is barren and cold and without life, void of life. So as you can see here, you see that there is quite a bit of life, but not as much as in these unique little pockets of activity in different parts of it. So I always like to say, how do we see down in the bottom of the ocean, right? There are databases in which you can, in that for many, many years since the 70s, scientists have collected data, and they have programs like this in which you can look at very different sites in our Earth and see different data points, such as like what's the temperature, or is there oxygen, how much oxygen, and even what's the biology down there. Now, in some unique places, which I'll show you the Earth's distribution of deep sea hydrothermal vents, this phenomena occurs. And what happens is, it doesn't happen everywhere on Earth because it has to be a unique location where the plate tectonics on Earth meet. These are called, it's not all plate tectonics. They have to do subjugation, or where sea floor is expanding. And yes, sea floor does expand every year. Of course, we don't feel it moving because it's a very small amount. It's around 1 to 2 millimeters per year. So it doesn't move it doesn't expand that much. But because their plate tectonics are meeting there are fissures in which seawater, right, 4 degree seawater, trickles down to the bottom, to Earth's core, to the magma core, right? By when you have interaction between the cold seawater and that magma, that liquid undergoes a transformation in which it becomes not water now, it becomes hydrothermal vent fluid. Now that fluid, as you know, it's melted rock in the Earth's core, so it carries a lot of minerals, a lot of metals, and a lot of different gases. Now this becomes buoyant, so it starts to go up the surface, and it's not a gentle current, and it explodes out. As you can see here, that is called a black smoker, right? And the reason why it's called a black smoker, it's, as you can see, when that fluid hits the cold seawater, all of those minerals and metals that were there, remember, you go as the trivia saying 700 degrees Fahrenheit. It's around 350 degrees Celsius. And then you get exposed, that liquid gets exposed to 4 degrees Celsius. So that's a pretty drastic temperature change. So everything that was in that liquid now precipitates, comes out, it turns, and all those minerals and metals look black because now they're precipitating out. That's why it's called the black smoker. Now, some of the time, they're not straight in the spreading axis. And if you can see, you have, and let me go out of here, you have what's called warm or diffuse flows, in which they are not in the center of the activity, and they have much more mixing with seawater. Now, these are not the same as the white smokers. White smokers, as you saw in the trivia, they're not as hot as black smokers, but they are very warm, very hot. Warm or diffuse flow vents have much more seawater mixed with the hydrothermal vent fluid. So the temperature is actually 60 degrees Celsius, some of them. So the maximum temperature would be like around 120 degrees Fahrenheit. There, where you have these warm diffuse vents, you have the majority of life. So as Patty was doing their craft with Riftia tube worms, this is a colony of Riftia tube worms attached to a diffuse flow. And this picture was taken at the mid-Atlantic ridge, which is in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So where are these vents in the world on Earth? So if you see, this is a map of the world, and you have all of these red dots are confirmed hydrothermal vent sites. The ones that are in yellow, some of them have been confirmed as of now. In Japan, mostly, they're the newest ones that have been found. But if you see here what they were saying in the Arctic, you do have a lot of confirmed sites. And my main area of study is in the East Pacific Rise, which is right here off the coast of Central America. So here's a very nice picture of, I'm going to talk about how is it that we see these systems and how we study the systems. And I just wanted to tell you a picture, like we talked before, there are a lot of species that are present in deep sea hydrothermal vents, right? If you can see here, there's fish that withstand this amount of pressure and temperatures. And this is another picture of kind of like computationally how you see a hydrothermal vent site. This is a very special one called Guaymas Basin off of the coast of California. And here is the American research ship Atlantis. This is the one that is most involved, not the only one, but the one that's most involved in manned missions to deep sea hydrothermal vent sites, and utilizing Alvin submarine to go down to 7,000 meters, 4,000 meters, depending on the site that you're going to. Now, this Alvin submarine looks pretty big. Actually, it's the sphere inside the submarine that is man-mediated. You do need a pilot to pilot it, and you only fit 3 people. It has 3 windows on the side and 2 windows for the pilot to drive it. And if you think how long is it going to take to go to the bottom of the ocean in this, the average time is around 2.5 hours to go down if the weather is pleasant. But overall round trip, it can be up to 8 hours. So not for the claustrophobic at heart. So this is a picture of Atlantis with the Alvin right here, resting, waiting for the next day. You have these iron weights. And what the iron weights do is help the submersible go down. You see, these are called wenches. These are basically what the pilot uses to grab any samples, biological samples that are down there. People, sometimes scientists in the lab that I did my PhD on, they had these PVC pipe type of incubators, right? Where they would leave them in the bottom of the ocean and pick them up weeks later, months later, days later, just to see the bacteria that was living in these environments over time. Or they would pick up different microsensors in the basket or any CTDs, which are cores, so you could take fluid. They have stainless steel injectors where you would aspirate some of that fluid from vents. Now this is the French one, and it's also man mediated. It's a vehicle. The research ship is called l'Atalante, and the submarine is called Nautil. Now, in the United States, we also have remotely operated vehicles. So it's a submarine that doesn't need a pilot or any researchers inside. You actually pilot it from the ship, and it's called Jason. That's the ROV, so remotely operated vehicle. And this is what kind of like the controls for Jason are here. This is my former PI, Dr. Costantino Vetriani, who was in a research trip, and they were controlling Jason from the ship and not from inside the submarine. So you might have seen before, there is no life in the deep sea. And when we think about energy production, we always think about photosynthesis. In this case, none of these organisms rely on photosynthesis to create energy. In any case, how they create energy is from chemical agents, right? So this is a picture of, this is in the East Pacific Rise. These are all chimneys. Some of them are turned off because if you see, you don't see any smoke coming out of it. So these are shut down. These systems do shut down from time to time. You see a little fish there. And this is the Alvin with the lights on, obviously, for them to be able to direct themselves to the sites. These are the arches, another type of vent system. This is 2,500 meters in the Pacific Rise also. So what and who is down there and how do they live there, right? As I said, they live off of what's called chemosynthesis, in which they use chemicals to produce their food, their energy source. So again, this is a picture of the Riftia tube worms. As you can see, these are the famous Yeti crabs. And the Yeti crabs, actually, it's really interesting. They eat from those black smokers that come out and from the diffuse vents. Remember, the diffuse vents are the colder, and I put colder in quotation marks because they're cold, but they're not that cold. In our rate, they're very hot. There's biofilm or clumps of bacteria growing underneath that crust, and it comes up, and you can see in some videos little specks coming out of those diffuse flows. So the crabs actually go close to those diffuse flows and pick up the bacteria that is coming out of those vents, and that's their food. Now, if you see this is a piece of basalt or a piece of a smoker. And you can see here that it has a white film on it. When we do microscopy or look at it under a microscope, and this is an electron microscope, you could see that this white film is actually called, it's a biofilm of bacteria. So a mass of bacteria on that rock, all right? And what do they use to live in this environment, the bacteria, is hydrogen sulfide most of the time. Hydrogen sulfide, or you know it when you smell it, is the smell of rotten eggs, right? If you've gone to a bog or a mangrove field near a beach, you can smell, when you smell that hydrogen sulfide, that rotten egg smell. So in the sea hydrothermal vents, there's a very high concentration of hydrogen sulfide. This is the tenant of what most of the bacteria there use as an energy source. In that way, as you did in your craft, in Riftium, they have a trophosome, so a little sac inside them. And because they live next to this diffuse flows, you have hydrogen sulfide that you utilize as energy. They produce sugar or an energy source for the tube worm, so then the tube worm lives. Now, at the same time, when those, as I said, those hydrothermal vents sometimes shut down, when they shut down, everything shuts down and the tube worms die and then have to move on. Now, there's a comment that I wanted to say earlier. These Riftia, even the alvanellids, which are the Pompeii worms, they're red. And the reason why they're red is the same reason that our blood is red. They have hemoglobin, okay? So hemoglobin in humans move oxygen through our body. Leg hemoglobin in the Riftia tube worms or any tube worms move in their bodies hydrogen sulfide for the bacteria that live in them. Okay, so if you think about it, they're transporting the food to the organisms that give them the energy to survive, which I think is super cool. Riftia tube worm in particular have endosymbionts, like Patty said, they live inside the trophosome. Pompeii worms don't have any endosymbionts, they have exosymbionts, which are outside. And if you saw the Pompeii worms have like little hair-like structures outside, that is where their bacteria live. And this is a picture of one of the bacteria that is found and was discovered in this deep sea hydrothermal vents. It's a epsilon proteobacteria, which is a category of bacteria. And in this case, this one is called Caminibacter medi-atlanticus because it was found in the mid-Atlantic ridge, which is one of the deep thermal vents at the lab I studies. So who lives in here? As you saw this one already, the Pompeii worm, right? You have mussel, you have fish, you have shrimp that survive there. You have lots and lots of different organisms, some worms that are not alvanella tube worms. It's really a very rich and species. It has a high species richness. It has a lot of species that live and survive with bacteria, and archaea being the main organisms that basically are the ones that maintain that whole ecosystem. So if you see here, these are serpulid worms, which are actual worms. They're not like the tube worms that we saw before. And you have different type of crabs. You have obviously the Yeti crab, the Galatade crabs, and this is a very big colony of Galatade crabs in some of these deep sea hydrothermal vent systems. And of course, my favorite, as you can see here, is a very big colony of Riftia tube worms. And as you saw, as I told you beforehand, they live off of the hydrogen sulfide in the environment, and it's in the micromolar range, so that's pretty high. For us as humans, that is toxic ranges. We wouldn't survive that much of hydrogen sulfide. All right, and here's a picture in the microscope of the amount of bacteria that live in there, right? And Patty was putting glitter on it, so you see how much. Well, the amount of bacteria that are there are kind of in the range of 10 to the 8, all right? So that is millions of billions of bacteria in one little sac in one tube worm. So that's pretty awesome. And again, this is another picture of a black smoker in the East Pacific rise. And these things can get really tall because it is because of the accumulation of the minerals that precipitate from the smoke coming out of the chimneys. They come sometimes to 50 meters, 100 meters, 150 meters. And as it progresses, sometimes they do tumble down. Now, this is a different type. So you didn't see the bacteria that much on the East Pacific rise. This is another deep sea hydrothermal system called the Guaymas Basin, which is one of the closest ones next to the shore. This is only 3,000 meters down. And I said only because, used to 7,000 meters, and so on. But all of this that you see here, right, are bacteria growing there. And they're growing at such a concentration, such an amount that you can actually see them with your naked eye. And these ones in particular are super interesting to me because these bacteria that live in these deep sea hydrothermal vents use petroleum compounds, alkanes, which are long chain hydrocarbons, as an energy source. So in addition of deep sea hydrothermal vents having hydrogen sulfide, some, such as this system, has a lot of hydrocarbons or things that you would find in petroleum, for example. And these organisms break it down as a food source. All right, so with that, I will leave you. I would like to thank Dr. Constantino Vetrani for the images and GeoMap app, which is the program that I use for mapping images for the geological data. So do I have any questions?
So do you have the link for the Google Doc? We can send it to you if you don't have it.
No, I do have it. Let me pull it up.
Okay. Yeah, there's lots of questions for you there.
Oh, wow. All right. Guys, another thing, I don't know if you know that the show on Netflix called Alien World, and they do talk about the hydrothermal vent systems. They don't only occur in the deep sea. There are systems that occur in shallow vents. That's what they're called. And some of them also occur, Yellowstone is a geothermal system also. But it's interesting. You should look it up. There's an episode of my colleagues that did a postdoc when I was doing my PhD at the lab at Rutgers, does a little blurb there looking at shallow vent, hydrothermal vent. So if you're interested in this, it's really cool of you to see it. So I have a question here. Are similar organisms found at all vents, or some of them have different communities? Jeff, that's a very good question. And the answer is that they are unique in some places. Places like the East Pacific Rise have most of the time only tube worms, whereas Mid-Atlantic Ridge has a lot of mussels, which you don't find in the East Pacific Rise. There are different types of crabs in every single vent. And the thing is, tube worms, for example, the Riftia, are found in every single vent that has been discovered. How they get there, how they mobilize, we don't know yet. And that is a very big research area that is going on. A French group, Nadine Labrie, mostly works on these types of questions pertaining tube worms. Somebody asked me, have I ever gone? Well, unfortunately, in my time doing research there, I could not. So when you go on these research cruises, you go for a month or 2 months at a time. They're not short trips. And when I was doing my PhD, I couldn't go. If I had the opportunity to go, of course I would go. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. There's not a lot of people that get to go down there. You actually have to, these research trips are very expensive and it takes a lot of coordination. Usually you have 5 different lab groups from all over the world sharing dive time. So it's a very complicated machinery to go through. But yes, of course I would go. I would suggest if you are claustrophobic, it would not be a good place for you to be, just because there is, as you saw, it's a sphere, there's no bathroom. You have to be there very close quarters with 2 other people for a very long time. Matt, okay, so Matt, you asked, why do chimneys turn off? So the idea of it is, or what scientists or like us are thinking, is that underneath the Earth's crust, it's kind of like there is like tubing, there's veins under it, right? And sometimes one of those veins or the crevices in which they go through the seafloor clogs. And once it clogs, there's no more hydrogen sulfide, no more hydrothermal fluid going through, so it just shuts off. Now, there are other events too that I didn't talk about, which are really prominent, is you do have eruptions, just like any volcano. So when you do have eruptions, it's interesting because everything gets eviscerated. You have magma going up to the seafloor. It kills everything. And the amazing, mesmerizing thing is that in 3 months, you already see two worms growing, biofilm growing. In a week, you see biofilms already crusting over that magma. So it's a pretty dynamic environment. So even though it shuts off, other ones emerge. What kind of minerals? Well, there's a lot of copper, zinc, lead. I'm trying to think what other ones. Those are the main ones. And you can mine them, but it's really, really deep. I mean, the machinery just to go down there, it's really, really complicated and expensive. So I think, I don't think people are that interested in spending that much money to go get the minerals from there. But it would be, an alternative, I guess. How does this bring deep sea creatures? Yeah, so the pressure, so I was asked, how do they bring them up to the surface? And if the pressure change is dangerous? The answer for that is yes, they do bring them to the surface. Sometimes they bring them in stainless steel cages. Sometimes they bring them in buckets. They're very dangerous to bring to the surface. So for example, for tube worms, they collect them and of course they don't survive. So they actually dissect them. For that fish that I showed you in the picture, I showed you the pretty picture. I've actually seen those fish out of the water into the surface and they basically explode. They actually expand and don't look very nice. But yes, so they haven't figured out how to retrieve organisms alive, right? Just because of that problem, because of the pressure problem. Human pollution and global warming affect hydrothermal vents. Well, global warming, not so much, just because it's very, very deep down. I think, as you know, to change the temperature of water takes a lot of energy, and we have seen temperature changes at the surface, but at the deep ocean, it would take, I don't think in our lifetime, for us to see a change in temperature that deep down. And up there, you have the hydrothermal vent system. Oh, it's 350 degrees, 150 degrees, 60 degrees, and then when you go away from that system, within feet away, it goes back to the 4 degrees that is in the normal floor. Okay, so research site. So our lab works in various research sites. I focus most particular in the East Pacific Rise. Let me pull up the presentation again so I can show you. It's off the coast, so actually we fly into Mexico and take the ship from there. The other one is Guaymas Basin, which is off the coast of California, which I showed you. But most on that. But my lab has worked on the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, on Juan de Fuca Ridge, which is in by Seattle, right, by Washington State. So let me see if I can blow this up, kind of show you. Too much. So right here, East Pacific Rise. So 9 North is around here. Guaymas Basin is up here. Juan de Fuca Ridge, like I said, it's up here by Washington State. Mid-Atlantic Ridge is literally in the middle of the Atlantic. So those are the sites that our lab mostly focuses on. There are people that just study one site for their whole lifetime. So it's really interesting because it's a place that it's been around for a while and there's still lots and lots and lots of questions. I have a question. Do you think future work will be dependent on using ROVs? Most of the time now it's cheaper to send ROVs other than man-made submarines. Not to saying that the human eye, sometimes it's better to go down there and to explore things and to make better decisions. It is dangerous, right? Just so you know, they actually just built a new Alvin, and I think last year it was the first dive of the new Alvin. It took around 15 years to finish building it, to be functional. It actually, I don't have to tell you how many labs and research goes into building one of these things. This is basically off of Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute in my Martha's Vineyard. That's where the Woods Hole Institute is. If you have any chance to visit it in Falmouth, they have the original orb from the original Alvin in the museum. It's really cool. Well, it's really cool for me. You should, anybody that's around there should go visit it because it's truly wonderful. All right. Do the fish shy away? Yes, they do shy away from the light. So somebody asked if the fish shy away from the lights. Of course, they're not used to it, but you do see them swimming. Yes. So Gina said, you said you share diving time, you go down with other groups outside of yours. So what happens, Gina, there's 3 people. The pilot always has to be the same person. And then you have 2 other people. Sometimes it's 2 PIs or primary investigators for 2 different groups. Sometimes it's a PI and a graduate student. And what they do is you have huge meetings every single day to kind of plan what you're going to do in the sites. Sometimes you have one day it's one group, the other day is another group, or if groups are working together, they kind of coordinate and say, hey, can you go down there and pick this and this for me? Or can you pick this and this for me? And then when I go down, I'll pick this up for you or drop this for you. So it's a very much collaborative work. And it's not only microbiologists, it's geologists, it's chemists. So it's a very multidisciplinary, concerted workforce. So how the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is around 7,000 meters. Yes, as I said, the deepest depth of the ocean on Earth is Marianas Trench with 12,000 meters. Do you know the lifespan of the animals? I'm not sure. I think I'm pretty sure of the tube worms, and it's basically as long as you have hydrogen fluid going through hydrogen sulfide at the levels that it needs, they can live for as long as they have that. Oh my God, so many questions. How does the energy of a deep sea creature compare to an animal that lives closer to the surface? It's all relative, right? So as a microbiologist, right, bacteria, for example, the lifespan of bacteria is much more shorter, and if you compare it to us or animals, right, or even fish. That's why they replicate, they divide much faster. So, the lifespan for different organisms really depends on their food source down there because it's scarce. It's not like it's food cordon. There's food all the time. So it really depends on, as us, if you're in an environment that you don't have a food source, you die pretty quickly. So it really does depend on the amount of food, and they might be faster or they might be slower. It just depends on the bacteria that they're using as a food source. Okay, so Journey asks, being so close to mid-ocean ridges, do earthquakes affect? Yes, they do, Journey. That's a very good question. And actually, sometimes they originate in the ridges, and usually there's sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes then you have a volcanic an eruption happen, and it clears the hydrothermal site. So obviously it does affect them. Some of the towers of the black smokers, if the earthquake is really close, you can have them topple down. But as I said, they recover pretty quickly. What led you to be interested to this field of study? All right, so to be honest, I wanted to be a doctor, and I had to take microbiology to get into med school. So as a sophomore in college, I took general micro, and my professor at the time worked with halophilic archaea. Archaea is a type of microorganism that is mostly only live in extreme environments. So high salt, high temperature, high acid, things like that. And I got mesmerized by the fact that life could happen in places that they're not supposed to happen, or in places that we cannot survive. So I started doing research with him on archaea that lived at really high salt concentrations. And I really wanted, when I graduated, I wanted to do my PhD on an extreme environment. And when I was looking at extreme environments, I came across deep thermal vents, and I thought they were like the coolest thing ever, because they're not supposed to be life at the bottom of the ocean and with no light and super high pressure and toxic elements. And it does, and it's a really complicated, beautiful environment. So I got hooked. And I've been, I studied it, and I'm still interested in that ever since. How old are the basalt rocks? Or, as you saw from the trivia, they're pretty old. Again, it depends on if they're in an eruption. Of course, new basalt is dated when the eruption happens. In the East Pacific Rise, the last eruption, really big eruption, was in 2006. So the basalt there now, meaning that there hasn't been any new eruption that we don't know, is from 2006 on. Another, if the hydrogen sulfide in the vent similar to sulfur dioxide that comes from volcanoes in Hawaii. Well, they're both sulfur, it's just different types of sulfur. So sulfur dioxide is mixed with oxygen. Hydrogen sulfide is sulfur mixed with hydrogen. So there's different types of sulfur. But yeah, so basically it's just different types of sulfur. So different organisms use them as energy sources, just because how many electrons they have available to them for them to process. Pompeii worm, is the Pompeii worm named after the Pompeii volcanic eruption? Yes, it's exactly it. Have I discovered any species? The answer is yes. I discovered a new species of bacteria. It's called Parvivac. The genus is called Parvivaculum. The species, so it's a new species. The genus was there. The species is called Hydrocarbonoclasticus, and the reason it's called that is because it eats hydrocarbons. So that was my main field of study, is bacteria from deep sea environments or any geothermal environments that utilize hydrocarbons as food source, as a way to potentially use them for bioremediation in deep ocean oil spills. That was what I did my PhD on. How do you do field work at your samples? Well, as my samples, we got them from, as I said, you saw those wenches in the Alvin. You had this huge, sometimes we get this big syringes, stainless steel syringes, where you would suck up some of the hydrothermal vent fluid there. We would collect basalt from rocks. We also would collect albanellids or Pompeii worms, and some riftia worms. We would put them in the ship. We would process them. So we would take that liquid or those rocks and put them in media, which is kind of like a mixture of nutrients to try to see what bacteria grew on them. And we would take them, start growing them in the ship, and then basically take all our tubes and our growth media on a plane to New Jersey. And then we would continue on studying them here, growing them, isolating them, making sure they were pure, seeing what was there or who was there and what they were doing. In my case, my question was, are they using hydrocarbons as a food source? Some people were looking at what are they doing, what genes are being expressed at that moment in time, or what can they do in the environment to try to explain how does that environment function, right? How does that life cycle keep going with the bacteria that are present there? Where's the closest hydrothermal vent to New Jersey? Well, the closest is the Mid-Atlantic or the East Pacific. The closest is the East Pacific rise. For a long time, there was thought that there would be a hydrothermal vent site in the Puerto Rico Trench. There hasn't been any evidence to it. Hopefully in my lifetime, I will see if people can get down there and see something, but you do see some geothermal activity close to that point. Where's the new species you discovered found? That
Anyone
was
else
discovered in the
lose her?
East. No,
I see
here.
her again.
Does everybody hear me?
Okay. So, and I guess it was me that your thing went out. I couldn't hear you, but.
Oh, okay. So East Pacific rise, that's where the bacteria that I discovered is from. I answered this question already. What other extreme environments have you studied? Well, I studied in Puerto Rico. That's where I'm from. That's where I did my undergrad. I studied solar salterns, which are, if all of you have had sea salt at some point in your life, that's where they harvest sea salt. For example, the Salt Lake in Utah. That is a natural solar saltern. The concentration of salt there is around 20 to 25% salinity. In Puerto Rico, there are artificial ones in which you harvest sea salt. So I studied there. So salinity and temperature, those have been two extreme environments that I have studied. How many volcanoes do you think can be found? A lot. Remember, that ridge there is just one big volcano, just because you have all of this it's the cracks, so you have access to the mantle. So just think about it as one huge volcano. It's not like you're going to see the structure of the volcano because it's under the sea crust, but there's a lot. And the coolest project I worked on is the one I worked on for my PhD. Trying to see, and I worked on my PhD at the time that the oil spill happened in the Gulf of Mexico. And before that, there was very little research done on organisms that use hydrocarbons as a food source in deep sea environments or just bottom of the ocean. So I was involved in the Deepwater Horizon, some of the Deepwater Horizon hydrocarbon studies because of my expertise at the time. So that was one of the coolest things. Okay, thank you for all those amazing questions. I'm glad. Hopefully you learned a little bit about deep sea hydrothermal vents and you're interested in it. It's a really cool thing to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Keddis, for talking to our audience today. We hope you'll enjoy learning more about hydrothermal vents. And we will be, as an announcement, we thank you to everybody that came to our open house last Saturday. It's been a busy week for all of us at the Geology Museum, but we're very happy to be back in contact with you guys after the break. And we will be back in next month in March with our next late night event. So stay tuned for more information on our Facebook page, like us on Facebook, on Instagram, and we will see you next time with another cool topic. And please help us to thank Dr. Keddis again for her time to be here with us tonight and sharing her experience. Bye. Thank you.